Hello friends, welcome to my channel, a channel for learning simple coding. If you find this video to be helpful, please like, share and subscribe my channel. In this video, we are going to learn what is the alternative of getStaticProps in Next.js 14. If you are familiar with Next.js, you know that in Next.js we use getStaticProps for static rendering, or we can say client-side rendering. The client-side rendering terms has been changed to static rendering. So in Next.js 12 and before version, where we have a page routing, remember that we use page folder in place of app folder. It's called page routing. So in page routing, we were using getStaticProps function for client-side rendering or static rendering. But now from the version 13, that was beta version for this. Now in 14 version is a final version. So in 14 version, we are not able to use getStaticProps. Now how we can do static rendering, or how we can use the alternative, what is the alternative of getStaticProps for achieving client-side rendering or static rendering in Node.js 14. In previous videos also I have explained you that what is client-side rendering, what is server-side rendering, and how we can achieve all these things here. But in this video I am explaining in terms of getStaticProps alternative. So there are two alternatives in Next.js 14 that can work similar to getStaticProps. So I want to show you here a demo of error and the solution. So this is the application in which I am printing the author's name, and I click on any author and it display codes. So these information, remember that I have explained in terms of server side rendering and client side rendering. I can say static rendering and dynamic rendering. So in previous video I have explained how to create these applications. This application I have created in those videos. So in this video I am going to explain you that when you click here, on click of that we are using here dynamic routing. On dynamic routing we use getStaticProps. Remember that if you are familiar with Next.js, you know that this getStaticProps function before Next.js 12 version we use for client-side rendering or static rendering. So here this is dynamic parameter ID number. On the basis of that, the number of page generated by this function is called getStaticProps. Remember that I have explained in build time also in previous video how to check this. But here this, if you see the code here, these are the two pages. This is to display author name. It's a simple one. I'm using here next revalidated. So ISR I'm using here. So it's a single page that displaying list of authors. So that would be ISR. It may be static or it may be dynamic on the basis of your data. But if you click on any author, then this page open. Remember that. And this page is depend on this param, and we give the param and we fetch the data. Still ISR I'm using, and on the basis of that we are displaying the code. So remember that here if I want to make this particular page or number of page that would be generated by this ID should be static. This is called static rendering, or we can say client-side rendering. If we want to implement that, so I can use the function here export const getStaticProps. Remember that this is the function that used in Next.js 12 and before version for client-side rendering. Now you see that as I am using this function, I am getting an error. And if you see the error, that this error is getStaticProps is not supported in app, means app directory. It is supported in page directory, but is not supported in app rendering. Remember that. Now this is the error. So it is clear that you can't use this function in Next.js 14 because I'm using Next.js 14, and you can see the version here 14. This is the Next.js 14.2.3. So this particular function is not supported for client-side rendering or for static rendering. Now what is the alternative? So I just remove this. So I have two alternatives. First one is getStaticPath. So you can use this. So I'm making uncomment of this. Coding is simple, nothing special here. Once again, we are using fetch function and using ISR here. You can use here cache, no cache, whatever you want. Store, no store, because it depends on you that you want to use static rendering or dynamic rendering or ISR. I have explained this in my previous video. You can watch those videos also for proper understanding. But here I am fetching this and I'm using ISR. This information I am fetching, and I'm fetching this also. And on the basis of ID, number of page should be statically generated. I am passing ID to param. From this param, remember that from this param, Next.js will identify that number of page should be generated on the basis of dynamic ID. This quote ID I'm passing, suppose this quote ID is 25. On the basis of this param, this information will goes to here, and on the basis of this, total 25 page will be generated by this particular rendering statically. Remember that it will be rendering of on the basis of param. So on the build time, this function will run, and on the basis of ID, one by one, this ID will be given to this page, and automatically it will create a page, and number of ID depend on number of ID. If number of ID, for example, are 25, then 25 static page will be generated by this. How you can check this? I have explained in my previous video. For static rendering, you can check that on, you can check this function also there, how to check this. So at this page, this particular function getStaticPath, it will generate individual static page on the basis of this ID. Number of IDs are there, and we have to pass here path, and we have to pass fallback also. Remember, this fallback decide that it will display only those pages those are available in the ID. If you are passing a wrong ID, then should be 404 error. I show you here that if you see, I click on this and I click here, you see, on the basis of ID this page is coming, but if I say here this ID is not available, suppose I say this ID, so automatically 404 error is coming. Why? Because I have explaining here fallback means only ID available, those information should be displayed, but here now I am giving true. Then I refresh it, and you will see that this ID, it will show the ID number also. So I click once again on this and click here, it is working. Now I give the same ID like this and press enter, and you see this quote is not available, but ID is displaying here, quote is not there. So now this time it not generating error. So on the basis of this fallback, we can decide that we want to display only the ID pages, or we can display wrong ID also. Means this ID is coming, but data is not available in this particular, can say, REST API. So here it is displaying ID but not displaying a quote. Remember that. So false ID page will be displayed, but if I say fallback to false here, then it will display only the pages those are available on the basis of ID. So I can say false here, and you will see that if I do once again refreshing, then this ID would not be available, and once again I have to click on this, once again I have to call this page, and if I say ID, so you see that it will be 404. Why? Because this ID is not available in the param list. So if this param list is empty, then this particular property will say this is the wrong information. So you see, one alternative is getStaticPath. You see, you can see the code. One thing is there, we have to pass here, we have to return the path and the fallback property. Path should have this array parameter plus quote ID. So this information should be written like this, then it will run. I have explained this in my previous videos also, so you can check there also. Now second alternative is that I have explained in my previous video also for static rendering. This is generate static param. Remember that this generate static param is a new method that introduced in Next.js 14 for static rendering or for client side rendering. So here we are passing this information, here we are passing this, and on the basis of quote ID, remember that this is only the quote ID and ID we are passing here. This is the array which we are passing from this map function. Quote ID means the value of this here dynamic routes and the ID which is available. So on the basis of this is also generating a page. Remember that same functionality we will have. So I refresh this, then I click here, same functionality I have. If I pass the same ID, you see here, so it will, you see, it will displaying a false information. But if I want to disable this information, that I want only that it should display the valid ID, so I say here false. So that is the property dynamic params. So dynamic params is false, means only the params which are statically bound with this function, only those will be rendered, otherwise it will say 404 error. So I just once again I open this, and you see I click here, then again I give them ID here, and you will see that now 404 error is there. So similar to fallback property here, this also have the property here dynamic params. Remember that. So both are same, just working is same, but the writing is different. Here we are passing quote ID. This quote ID should be matched with this quote ID, which the route parameter you are passing, and this is the different way to pass the value, this is the different way to pass the value, but the working is same. So either you can use generate static param or you can use getStaticPath. Both are equivalent. You can use anything which you want. So these are the two functions. Those are alternative to this getStaticProps in Next.js 14. I think now you understand which one you can use in place of getStaticProps. In next video, we will see what is the alternative of get server side props also in Next.js 14. So if you like this video, please do subscribe. Thank you for watching this video.